I would like to motion that we vote on the curriculum separately, that we have one vote for the William and Mary curriculum textbooks and a separate, which would include the novels, correct, Mrs. Bernard?
Yes.
The novels go
Mrs.
with.
Smith, the novels go with William and Mary, and then the Michael Clay Thompson is the supplemental grammar and vocabulary. And if I could just add one more comment that I forgot to mention
Yes.
earlier. Thank you, I did want to let the board members know that this is material that you will find in the self-contained gifted programs in Paradise Valley and also the Deer Valley School District. And I appreciate Amber McCroby because she visited with both of the districts to find out about the books and how well they've been received from the community and the students and the parents. And would you like to say a few words about that, Mrs. McCroby, real quick?
Oh, thank you. I did. I had conversations over the phone and also via email. And again, the two directors just commented very positively. And again, it was very well received by the community. The students enjoyed the novels that they read, the discussions primarily that they had in their classrooms, the activities, the enrichment, the creativity that came along with this. And the administrators and parents, again, it was very well received by all. So they just had positive things only to say about it.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith.
Okay, so I would like to motion that we separate the vote, that we vote separately on the William and Mary textbooks and novel, and then a separate vote on the Michael Clay Thompson supplementals. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Colvin. Any discussion on that? Mrs. Burke, are you still with us? Mrs. Burke?
Yeah, I'm here.
You gave us a scare.
No, I have it muted because there's noise in the background, so it takes me a second to...
Okay. Any discussion before we vote on the motion on the table? Do you have any discussion on that?
No, but the motion to vote on them separately?
Correct. The motion on the table is to vote separately on the William and Mary textbooks and novels, and then a separate vote on the Michael Clay Thompson supplementals.
Okay, no, I don't have a problem with that.
I'm wondering why you would ask to do that.
Because I prefer one over the other.
These are meant to go in tandem together. So I'm befuddled.
It is
that's the word I would use.
It is my intent as a board member to vote for materials that I feel are appropriate for our students versus those that I have a concern with. And then, depending upon what happens, it will pass as is. Otherwise, Mrs. Bernard will give it a second shot. Any other discussion on the motion on the table?
I'm sorry, what do you mean by get a second job?
Shot at it. Sorry.
I'm sorry.
I don't have time for a second job. I wish I did, but there's no time for that. Just teasing, but would we be able to make I'm just asking before you vote, would we be able to make a comment now that you're going to separate this out after the vote, after you vote? Because if we only get one piece, depending on what piece, and not both parts of this, there may not be a need for this curriculum, and we may need to start over from scratch. So I'm just asking, following the vote, would we have an opportunity for a little more discussion or not?
There would be discussion after the vote to separate. If obviously if that fails, then we'll have to move to a vote to vote for it in a block.
Thank you.
Any other discussion on the motion on the table?
So, Mrs. Bernard, so if one piece fails and the other piece goes forward, you can't use the material for the curriculum that way?
Well, it would be,
Would it make
for
it a
example,
successful program?
Michael Clay Thompson is a supplement because, as with any curricular program, particularly language arts, it is really difficult to find something that hits every need in all of the areas that need instruction in language arts. William and Mary recommend using a supplemental program, and using this particular supplemental program, it highly complements the few gaps that are in the William and Mary program, provides additional grammar and vocabulary. So I'm just thinking, if William and Mary isn't supported, then and Michael Clay Thompson is, I don't think we really need Michael Clay Thompson, and that's all I was trying to say.
So what if William and Mary is supported and Michael Clay Thompson isn't supported? What happens?
We would want to search for additional supplemental materials that would support the grammar and vocabulary need for reinforcement. And you know, timing is something to think about too. I know that this program wasn't approved until last March, and so that's when the committee went out looking for materials. But again, they looked at, and Amber and Jenny can speak more to the materials they actually looked at, and why these two components are so important together.
So if you don't get the Michael Clay Thompson portion of it, and your program continues, it won't be as successful as what you anticipate to be if you had both of these materials approved.
That's one way of looking at it. Again, it would be the burden on the teacher to find additional supplemental material that really corresponds to this program and is suitable age-wise. It would take us some time, and I believe we'd probably be beginning the year without the complete package. And so this is really looked upon as meeting the needs of the program as a complete package. So we could walk in with William and Mary, but we would have gaps.
And I can see why there's a second job. If that happens.
We're just waiting on calling back Mrs. Burke.
Mrs. Bernard, can you remind me how many have signed up for this program at Town Meadows?
Oh gosh, we have full classes in both classes. We had to do a lottery in both situations. A lottery, we probably could have used, we might have been able to have 2 classrooms at each of these grade levels if we had thought through that. So I think it's very successful this first year. Very successful, and I only look forward to more growth.
Mrs. Burke, are you with us?
Yeah.
Okay. Any
I
other?
just heard a dial tone all of a sudden.
We did too.
That's funny. Well, not really.
Okay, so any other discussion on the motion on the table? Board members ready to vote?
Barb, are the teachers there? With the superintendent search and with my health issues, I haven't had a chance to review that curriculum in as much depth as I would have liked to. The teachers the 2 teachers are there.
One teacher is Jenny Dow. She's the one who gave the introduction, and then Amber McCroby, who's also familiar, is one of our teachers and is familiar with the texts, as well as Dorsey Medow, who's our elementary language arts coordinator. So we have 3 folks that you can certainly talk to about these materials.
Okay. Yeah, Well, I mean, I just, I want to, Mrs. Dow, it's awkward over the phone, but if you're faced with, if you're faced with dealing with some controversial issues in the curriculum, how is it that you handle it in the program?
Well, I will say that the curriculum that we're proposing does offer options. We, as teachers, always review and consider if they are appropriate for our students. We act as partners with our parents in education. We do not act as parents, partners in parenting. So we do look for things that are appropriate and draw the child back, the student back to the academic needs. If something is questionable material, then it is definitely not something that I would put before a child. So I hope that answers your question. I'm not sure if it does, but I do look for things.
Yeah.
Could I add a comment too? Also, gifted children are very aware of these issues. You do not have to bring them to the child. They are aware of it and they are asking about it. So having some materials that deal with some controversy or helping them to read and see in other perspectives or to be able to talk about it is very helpful because they really are aware of injustices or unfairness or what's going on in the news. They ask a lot of questions. So we do have to be aware that in that way they might be different than
And
a
we do
child
not
who may not be as aware of these things.
discounting we don't discount what they have to say. They need to know that they're validated in their thoughts and their feelings. But yeah, I agree with you on that matter, absolutely. And socially emotionally, they are different as well. And that's to be taken into consideration. We need to remember that as well, so.
Can I ask a question, because I haven't really discussed the curriculum because you have a motion on the table. Do we wait for your motion and then I discuss what I think of the curriculum, or?
Yeah, we need to
Okay, we need to vote on the
We
motion.
need to vote on the motion and then discuss.
Okay.
So this is a motion to vote on them separately.
Correct. My motion is to do two separate votes to separate the William and Mary from the Michael Clay. And if it passes, then we'll discuss each one separately and vote on each one separately. If it does not pass, then we will motion through for them as a unit and then discuss as a unit. So are we ready to vote?
Okay,
Do we need to do this as a verbal, Mrs. Sokolsky? Motion carries 3-2. Okay, so why don't we, I'll let you pick, Mrs. Humphries, which would you like to start with?
Well, why don't we start with Michael Clay Thompson?
Okay.
A little bit easier first.
Well, actually, can we ask Ms. Bernard, which one is better to go first? Does it matter? Because if one doesn't go, then the other one's moved. So which one would you like us to go?
Probably need to start with William and Mary then, because that is the central part of the program, and the Michael Clay Thompson is really supplemental. If that works.
Okay, so we're going to start the discussion on the William and Mary. And Mrs. Humphries, you want to go first on that?
Certainly. I went in a couple of different times to look at these materials, and frankly, just like that board member in Tempe that wants to go to that high school, I would love to be in 4th, 5th, or 6th grade in order to use the William and Mary materials. I thought that they were very well done. I am disappointed to hear that we are only allowing the children to look at the workbook, because I felt that those graphic organizers really were exciting and made me want to brainstorm and put things together, whereas drawing on my own piece of paper might not be quite as visual. I thought that the themes were good. I do have a question, because we aren't buying the workbooks. When we have the the literature selections, and I thought they were to annotate in order to analyze those selections. Will they then be having a copy of that material to annotate, or what would be the procedure for that?
Honestly, I do not know what the allowance is for copyright. I don't know that we could make copies of those. So we would most likely have to have the children well, not have to, allow them to do journaling. Journaling is a central part anyway, and we could use our journals, separate journals, to recreate these.
So they would
maybe
just
use overhead, smartboard, put them up there, do class discussion.
So maybe write their thoughts, or
Right.
rather than mark up
Rather than
the
mark up.
passage, as I thought was a wonderful idea, they would have to just kind of write down their thoughts and maybe put keywords in or
Absolutely,
something like
and
that.
select vocabulary. What we can also do is you don't, without using highlighters, you can actually highlight specific words using like little transparency type things.
I felt that it gave an opportunity for the children to analyze and look at literature closely, gave higher level reasoning, and also integrated with other subjects in school. I really appreciated the quality of this literature and the graphic novels, and sorry, not the graphic, the novels, not graphic novels, but the novels. I felt that the diversity that was represented, we talk about America, and we talk about the melting pot. We each have a different journey here. There's only one set of people that can say that they didn't have to immigrate to America, and they have their own story full of hardship and suffering. And I think we all have stories that could be shared. And so I think it's important for our kids who are growing up in a more and more diverse society to be aware of other stories and to be aware of other experiences. Sometimes elementary kids come home with a novel and there's maybe some things that are challenging to them, but I think that's an opportunity to talk with a parent and to work through that and deal with those issues. So overall, I enjoyed all of the materials that William & Mary had to offer. They are recognized for their gifted education literature. And I also felt that the novels were carefully selected. I saw some of my favorites there, like The Secret Garden. That is an old favorite of mine. So I was very, very excited about them, and I understand that there may be some difficult challenges in some of those novels, but again, these kids are dealing already with difficult issues. They are more aware of what's going on in the world around them, and they are asking hard questions. So I think that with parent and teacher input and working together, I think that any of the curriculum that was presented would be very appropriate and very exciting for our gifted kids.
Mr. Colton? Mrs. Tram?
I like Mrs. Humphrey's comments. I think she nailed that. So there's really not much I can say to follow that, because I do support the curriculum that has been provided to us to view, and I did have the opportunity to view it, and I thank you for all your work on this curriculum. I'm glad there's different novels and in the curriculum on the perspectives and cultures that the students are able to view, and allowing our teachers, who are the experts in this program, to use whatever materials that they need to fit the needs of the students that are in their classrooms.
Mrs. Burke, did you have any comments? Stacy? Stacy? Okay, Mrs. Sokolsky is going to try and phone her back. I'll go ahead and talk about my concerns with this curriculum. I did spend quite a bit of time in the in the office looking at the materials. I was kind of a fixture there for quite a while. And I do have a lot of concerns with the William and Mary materials. It was mostly the fourth grade that I had a lot of concerns. I know in the past, I and some of my fellow board members have spoken of that we believe that sometimes there is political bias, specifically leftist political bias. And I know that we have been asked to please provide specific examples. So I took the time to pull specific examples as far as what I felt was leftist political bias. Specifically speaking, it was mainly in the fourth grade one that there's a lot of from the progressive political platform bias in it. And the Progressive Party was formed under Teddy Roosevelt, for those of you who don't know.
He was a Republican, may I add?
Yes, ma'am. And the Progressive Party was called the New National Party. It's basically a form of fascism, which is leftist in the American political system, in which it believed in the national regulation of corporations. And progressives believe that it is the government's responsibility to exercise control over the people to better serve the people. That's overall what it is that the progressives believe. They do have a platform. You can look it up. I believe it's about a 70-point platform. So specifically and like I said, it was mainly the fourth grade. Some of the sample writing prompts, one of the questions was, should smoking be illegal? I think that could be better worded if we're concerned about wanting children to investigate the effects of smoking on the body or the lungs. It should have been worded that way. And it is well known that progressives want to ban and make smoking illegal because it isn't good for the person. But in our country, we believe in freedom and people the ability to choose for themselves. Another question in there was, should people adopt pets from the pound or buy pets at a pet store? And again, I believe that could have been worded better as far as what are the pros and cons of pet adoption versus pet purchase, or specifically if they're concerned about the conditions of these farms where these animals really are mistreated, maybe have them look that up and write a discussion paper on that. Because I don't believe that it's my business to tell my neighbor down the street where it is that they should be getting their pet from. For myself, I believe in adoption, but I don't believe that it's my right to impose my opinion on others. Another question was about schools that install vending machines that sell soda and chips in the cafeteria. Do these machines belong in the cafeteria? Another one was, how can physical fitness of elementary students be improved? Again, I think that a better research question in that, and again, there's a big push, progressives right now, about the obesity and the lack of physical fitness of kids and trying to mandate to people what it is that their kids should do. I think a better way for that research question would have been, what are the benefits to physical fitness, and let the student research it themselves and come to a conclusion on their own. And then they're far more likely to make those positive changes if they research it on their own, but that's a very leading question. Here's another one that really bothers me. Should students be permitted to carry only nutritious foods in their school lunches? As a dietitian, this really, really bothers me. I don't feel that schools have any right, the government has no right to tell a parent what they can and cannot put in their child's lunch. Would I like to see people eating healthy food? Yes. But that is a parent's decision, and that's not something that anyone should be making judgment of anyone else. Again, this is a question that could have been written better. If we really want children to learn about the benefits of consuming healthy foods, then maybe a question should have been posed. What are the benefits of consuming nutritionally dense foods and the outcome in the school progress or something like that? Because there is a definite correlation in that. Another one was, should television advertisements targeted at young children be reduced or eliminated? Again, that is not up to the government or anyone else. That is a parent's right to choose. And I believe that that's a very leading thing. And again, if you wanted children to understand the correlation between advertisements and people trying to encourage you to purchase something that maybe is not the best, then maybe do a writing research on that. And then one other one, in the state of Vermont, they have the most active progressive party that is current. And one of their platform items is to support farmers' transition to organic and sustainable practices. And in the Connect to Science novel for The Secret Garden, it says, have students investigate the changes in gardening practices and diets due to the movement towards organic methods. That's a very direct correlation. And again, to garden organically does not improve the nutrition status of an individual whatsoever. It's a choice as far as pesticides and the negative effects that pesticides can have on a person's health and correlation to cancers and whatnot. And I think that that's a valid thing maybe to have someone research, but that's a very direct correlation, again, to some progressive beliefs. And then there were just more, excuse me, could I please show some respect? And then just a lot of, there was something in here called border towns in the 4th grade one that I thought just was rather racist, that Mrs. Bernard is shaking her head, yes. I just didn't feel like that this was a good poem for children to read, because it speaks badly of our country. It is basically stating that if someone is an illegal and they come over here, that they cannot live the American dream. Well, no, if you're breaking our laws, then no, you can't participate fully in what the American dream is. That's true. There were a lot of for the most part, the novels I didn't have issues with. There were some specific novels that I did have some problems with, specifically like Taking Sides by Gary Soto. There was a lot of emphasis on skin color in there, brown versus white, a lot of discussion of that, a lot of emphasis on materialism, haves and have-nots, discussion of listening to the rapper Ice-T, and I don't think that he's the best rapper to, with his gang affiliation, to have our children reading information on. Overall also, and I know I've discussed this with Mrs. Bernard, there's also a lot of listening to music and asking children to consider how artists are inspired by the events in their own lives, and then how that inspired the music. And again, I don't have an issue with that, other than it's not a music class, and that's really kind of what we're asking. A lot of the music that they're having the children listen to is actually very nice. You know, it's classical, you know, like Mozart, Beethoven, Tchaikovsky. Asks a lot of the students to look at pictures and self-portraits. And again, it's not an art class. We're not, it's supposed to be language arts. I had a real concern with the Beverly Clearly, A Girl from Yamhill. I thought that the portions of that novel were far too mature for a 5th, 6th grade student, talking about how the mother often manipulated the girl about dating and marriage and manipulating boys and stuff like that. And I just didn't feel that that was very appropriate. I was very concerned with, in the 5th grade, there was an autobiography, Notes of a Translator's Son. And in the middle of this, it speaks of this child who was living with his grandparents because the parents were having marital issues. The parents come back to the grandparents to retrieve their son, and the grandfather walks out of the room, comes back, places a shotgun to his head, and threatens suicide if the parents take the child. And then it goes on to explain how it created dysfunction in the family. I don't think that that's an appropriate story for a 5th grader to read. And the author even noted in here that that information was not shared with him until he was about 20 because of the serious nature of it. So I just don't feel that that's appropriate. And this is a autobiography. So that's another incident of something that I just did not feel that was too appropriate. In the 6th grade one, that's on persuasion. That one, for the most part, I thought was a pretty, not too bad. There was one thing in there that I was really concerned with the content. There was an essay on censorship. It's on page 96, and the quote in it, and again, this was written for adults. I don't think it's appropriate for children to read. But the essay, and this is a portion of it, child pornography, which is the use of children in pictures, books, or films to perform sex acts or to pose in lewd positions or circumstances should be prohibited. That's part of this essay that the kids are reading. And again, I really do not think that that sort of detail, the way that it's written, that that's appropriate for 6th grade children.
Fortunately, in this day and age, some of them may have already been exposed to that on the computer.
As far as another book on Eleanor Roosevelt, again, that was another book that I believe, it's a good autobiography, but again, I believe it's really written for adults. It speaks of her father's drunken binges, violence, the fact that he got a servant girl pregnant, talks about her sexual relationship with her husband FDR in it, talks about FDR's affairs, it talks about how FDR and Eleanor then agreed to stay married, but agreed that it was just a partnership and that they would no longer have sexual relations, any intimacy between themselves. So I just, again, really believe that that book, again, it's a well-written book, it's an accurate book, but it's written for adults. I feel that the material is far too mature for a 6th grader. And then overall, there was a lot of, in the 4th and the 6th grade, there was a heavy emphasis on Black and Hispanic cultures. And the one thing that I did notice with the Hispanic is part of Hispanic is the Cuban, and in these, and not that we're doing Springboard, but you never see any examples of Cuban Americans who come over here. And my assertion with that is because, again, I believe that there's a bias in these books of victimization. Cubans, for the most part, who come over here are highly successful, the first if not the second generation. They're overwhelmingly conservative and overwhelmingly do succeed in the American dream because they came from a totalitarian communist country. So they really do embrace the freedoms that we have over here. So I would like to see novels or examples of, if we're going to do Hispanic studies, we need to include the Cuban American in the Hispanic studies. And if we are going to do studies on different cultures, the one that stuck out to me the most is, why aren't we including the Irish Americans, the Great Potato Famine? They're the first wave of poor refugees that came over to our country and were treated very, very poorly. They were taken advantage of. They were given very poor housing. They took any jobs that they could. They often were, the housing had no food, no water, no sanitation, ventilation, or daylight. And because of these conditions, and like even in just the town of Boston, 60% of the Irish children did not live beyond their 6th birthday because of these conditions. And there was an anti-Irish, anti-Catholic sentiment everywhere, and there were signs everywhere, no Irish need apply. So again, I believe that this speaks to part of what I believe that our district is trying to achieve as far as sharing different cultures with our students. But I really see a lack of cultures that, to be honest, if they have white skin, we don't discuss that culture. And to assume that because of the color of someone's skin that we're a monolith and we're all the same, I think is incorrect.
Mrs. Smith, I will grant to you that there may be some things you found that I would have to look at again to really understand what context they're in and how it is used. And maybe there may be 1 or 2 selections that we may want to find something else to put in place of that. The various questions that you talked about, illegal, should smoking be made illegal, adopting pets, the question about obesity or should students carry healthy foods in their lunch. I find these are examples of questions that children can take and think of for themselves and decide what the answer is, because there's no right answer. They can decide, yes, maybe smoking should be made illegal, or they can say, no, we all have the right to choose our activities. They can decide, yes, we should make everybody carry nutritious foods in their lunch. We're going to school. Or they can say, no, let's let everybody do junk food if they want. And this is an opportunity, and I think these are very good examples that have been selected so that a 4th, a 5th grade, or a 6th grade child can look at the question, look at both sides of the issue, and make up his or her own mind. And that's part of the Common Core standards, is that we help children to think through and decide an issue for themselves. There's no right answer. The teacher isn't going to say it's this way or that way. So when you talk about rewording the questions, I think you're seeking to put it into a slot where there maybe there's, okay, I want kids to carry nutritious foods in their lunch, but we don't want to ask the question in such a way that the kids can't think about it for themselves and weigh the pros and cons, and then come to a conclusion in their essay. Because frankly, I think kids are doing things in junior high and elementary school now that I probably did in college. We're just making it more on their level. We're learning how to teach them better to analyze and think and to give evidence for why they think that way. And so all of these questions that you have just used, television advertisements, they can think about that and weigh the issues and decide for themselves. If there's not a right answer that the text is trying to get or the teacher is trying to get, it gives them an opportunity to really hone those skills that they'll use later in writing papers or just thinking through things in their own life. As far as music and arts, part of the Common Core standards is that we integrate those into the curriculum. Okay, I know I'm a big music proponent, but my daughter just did a research paper on music. There are neurological, social, physical, and academic benefits to music. She had to speak to a specialist, and one of the music teachers said that it has been shown that our brains are wired for music. It is something that we neurologically need. And so integrating the music and the arts into, instead of making it off into a separate class, we're trying to bring it in and show it in a way that they see the interconnection between the various components. I mean, there's math in music. Okay, I'm not much of a music. I know there's math in music. There's, you know, in art there's shapes and there's math. All of this is to bring it in together and help them to think more clearly about connections, to reason, and to be able to think things through so that when they get out of high school, they will be prepared to go on in their careers or in college and be able to be problem solvers, people who think for themselves, who can look at something and say, I know what to do with that, or I have an idea. And that's the whole point of the Common Core curriculum, is that we can't just sit on our laurels and teach our kids what to think. We need them to know how to think for themselves and how to take a problem, look at it, think about it, try to solve it, research it, ask others what they think or what they might consider, and then come up with their own thoughts and own it themselves. So I think that I will grant you that there may be some things in there that we may want to change, but on the whole, I think this is a wonderful curriculum that our gifted students need. And to start now,
that our children, to develop the critical thinking skills, they do need to research something on their own. Therefore, the writing prompt should not be leading. My assertion is they are leading. They already have bias in them, in that the question is already posing a belief that this is wrong or this is right. Why do you think it's wrong, or why do you think it's right? I don't believe that they are objective, where a child is going out and researching something themselves and then coming to a conclusion. That is using critical thinking skills and coming to a conclusion based on their experiences and their own research. A lot of this is very, very leading. It is progressive. It is.
Well, then I guess I'm pretty progressive, because I don't see where it's leading.
I would encourage you to do research on the progressive party. It is progressive, and like I said, in our political system, the progressivism is on the left side. And the only reason I'm bringing that up is because we have been asked before, specifically by Mrs. Tram, to please provide specific examples, and that's what I'm trying to do.
And I appreciate that you were very specific. One thing is that when children encounter something, they're not going to encounter a neutral statement. They're going to encounter maybe a commercial or something that someone says at school. It's not going to be, well, what do you think about this? What are the pros and cons? They're going to encounter in a statement that says, you know, everyone under 18 should not have a driver's license. And then they are going to need to deal with that and think, well, do I agree with that or disagree? I really think that these questions are not loaded questions. There has to be a little bit of a interest factor. If you say, oh, what do you think? Smoking is good or not good? There has to be a little, okay. Sorry, I can't think of.
Well, why couldn't we even do a question like, do you think you'll smoke? Why or why not?
Because when you, I'm sorry, it's like, what is when you're writing a paper and you have your statement, and I'm sorry, it starts with a T and the word will have, your thesis statement has to have a little bit of controversy in it in order for you to show your support. And I will quote that from a University of Arizona Writing Center paper that I have printed out to give to my kids when they are struggling with writing a paper. that your thesis statement has to have an element of controversy so that you can then prove it. And I think that these questions that you are referring to can't be said in a neutral way. They have to be said, and I don't think they're really pushing something, but they have to be said in a way that engenders some interest in the child of exploring that. Just talking about why would you want to change the school calendars to say Christmas break? I mean, that could be an interesting question that children could write about, because there's something to be said on either side. I really am concerned that these materials are not there for a political agenda. They are there for children, and they are adopted by many, many schools.
If you were to go with the premise of what it is that you're stating, that writing prompts, that you believe that they should start with controversy,
I'm saying your thesis statement needs to have.
then it needs to be balanced.
Madam,
I am telling you that these are left-leaning prompts. So
Madam
again,
President, members of the board, make a motion to end debate and move to vote.
Mrs. Burke, are you with us?
I'm here, but I don't think that it's appropriate to end debate when other people haven't talked yet.
That's true.
Would you like to rescind your motion?
Who hasn't spoken yet?
Mrs. Burke.
Well, I guess we better get on with that then.
Mrs. Burke, do you have comment?
Yeah, and I didn't hear, I guess maybe I was off the line, I didn't hear you, Mr. Coleman, speak, but maybe I missed that. The materials that I looked at seemed okay. I'm listening carefully to both sides of the debate, and I guess that's one of the reasons I'm concerned about the sex acts and positions and suicide threats in front of children. I'm not as concerned about some of the other things, but those things, how is it in the curriculum talking about sex acts and positions? I mean, those aren't things that I think we need to have fifth graders explore further or...
Mrs. Burke, it was just defining what child pornography is. And granted, I said there may be some things we would want to look at. I'm trusting that our teachers and our coordinators and our assistant superintendent would, if there were such things that they felt were not appropriate for children, they would certainly find another piece that would be a better selection.
How did that kind of thing end up in that? I mean, that...
I have not
I
read
guess
through
I
it,
have
so-
to see that a little bit. I mean, because this is our chance to kind of discuss it and review it. That piece is concerning to me. So how is it talking about child pornography? Because I don't...
It's in the 6th grade, William and Mary Language Arts, and the theme in the 6th grade is persuasion. So there were 2 essays on censorship, one for and one against. And the one for censorship was speaking to why they believe censorship is good. And specifically within this, it stated part of their assertion why they believe censorship is good is that it says child pornography, which is the use of children in pictures, books, or films to perform sex acts or to pose in lewd positions or circumstances, should be prohibited. And it was written by an adult woman. I'm sorry I didn't write down her name. She does a radio show, and she wrote it in favor of censorship for a board that was listening to 2 different adults discuss why they believed censorship was good or why it was not good. So it was written for adults, by adults. And that's my concern, is that I believe a lot of the materials in the William and Mary, whether it's the novels or it's essays in there or biographies, is that I believe that the content is far too mature. Mrs. Burke, are you there?
I am.
Okay.
I think Mrs. Tram had something to say as well. I'd like to hear.
Okay, Mrs. Tram.
I'm reading about censorship and online. I guess what I wanted to say is that, we as board members are here to ensure that we provide the right education for our students, or to provide a good education for our students. And politics don't belong here at all. None of that. Politics is not. So if your mindset is on politics, of course, whatever you look at, you're going to think it's either left or right. So if you look at my bottle of water, it says pure life. What do you think? Pro-life? Or what? You could take any piece of paper, anything, and if your mindset is political agenda, then you're going to start looking that way. I'm here for students' education. The things that you read, I didn't see where it was politically driving you to a certain direction. It gives the opportunity for the students to go out and do their research. Gifted kids can do research. They're going to come back with a different answer than even the 2 questions that were asked. For example, would you adopt a dog from the Humane Society, or would you go buy it at the pet store? They can come back and say, you know what? I want to go out and walk the streets and find a stray dog, and that's the dog that I want to bring home. I want to save those. They can take it to another level. They can do their research. We have teachers here that will look at the materials. They know what their curriculum is. They know what they need to teach their students to meet the standards. They will identify and use the materials appropriately for our students. So if you're talking about sex acts or sex positions or whatever sex you want, they're not going to use sex in the classroom unless you're talking about a health class. Teachers are educators and they know what to do to educate our students. And a recommendation by the board, the superintendency, and our group of teachers here that we appreciate, they're recommending this. And we had community review, and the survey came back, and it's all positive. I mean, if you look at it, a lot of these numbers are in the 20s. It's almost a full score for these supports. There's a couple of them, again, they're political agenda related because they talk about politicals, and those are the negatives in here, which aren't very few. There's maybe 1 or 2 comments about the political agenda in here. Again, that's not our mindset here in Gilbert Public Schools. We want to focus on education, not politics here.
I agree that we should not be focused on politics, and I am stating that there is a political bias in this material, mostly in the 4th grade. It's very strong in the 4th grade, not so much in the 5th and 6th. The 5th and 6th, it was more the content and the maturity. I felt it was just, a lot of it was too mature. The novels and just the short stories and the biographies and stuff, the content, I just thought was just too mature to expose children to. I most certainly would not want my child reading some of this stuff.
So, which novels have the child pornography and the suicide threats in front of the child?
This is all in the College of William and Mary, the textbook itself.
So this would be the textbook
Yes.
for the course?
Yes, so the suicide is in, it's called Notes of a Translator's Son, and the 5th grade is basically autobiographies. That's basically the focus. And this story is in it, and it's about 6 pages long. And it's mainly discussing this author and his background and growing up, and his grandfather is Indian and his grandmother was Slovakian, and just, it's more of a cultural thing. It's just right in the middle. It had that very I found to be very shocking about the shotgun and the grandfather threatening to commit suicide, and just really, I don't think appropriate for fifth graders. But there are just examples of that throughout the fifth and sixth. It was mainly the fourth grade that I thought was very politically biased.
Mrs. Smith, would it be appropriate for one of the teachers to talk a little bit about the teacher material and what they would do in planning lessons?
Certainly.
Thank you.
Well, I thought maybe this might be a good moment to.
I'm sorry, can you speak more into the mic? I'm having a hard time.
Absolutely. Is that better?
A little bit more?
Okay.
That's better.
Okay. There are options and opportunities to be flexible throughout. And in fact, in this one here it even says for the William and Mary book, since a child can read only a small number of books prior to high school graduation, it's highly unreasonable and intolerant for a school or teacher to force the child to read a particular book as a precondition to graduation. It goes on. Basically, what it's saying is that there are options, that we will not necessarily put in front of a child everything that is in the curriculum. We do need to read first what's there, choose what's appropriate, and then give that as an option to the child to read. So I just wanted to make sure that that was clear, that this is not, I'm not going to force feed everything that's in the curriculum to our children. We really care about what our kids are exposed to as well. So. And William and Mary knows this as well.
And there is, I believe, I understand that there is always an option of, for the parent asking for a different selection or asking for a different novel, so they can choose if the child, if you're aware, a lot of curriculum is explained at back to school night. If you're aware that they might be reading a certain novel or a certain selection and you don't want that to happen, please contact the teacher ahead of time. Give her an opportunity or him an opportunity to find something else or recommend something else that your child could use. That happens frequently, and frankly, Mrs. Smith, I've been known to give my children a book after I've taken a magic marker to a few spots and taken something out that I don't feel is appropriate for them when the rest of the novel is very good. October Sky is one example. My son was in 7th grade. I thought everything in that book he could benefit except for one small section, and so I took a magic marker, just took that out of the book and let him have the rest of the book to read and enjoy. I mean, I have my standards too, and I'm very protective of my children.
I hear what you're saying. It's not so much the novels. The novels, for the most part, I'm fine with. It's the textbook, College of William and Mary. I have a lot of issues with each grade. It's not isolated. I believe that a lot of the material in 5th and 6th grade is just far too mature in the content. And the 4th grade, I believe, is very, very politically biased. It's anti-American, it's leftist, it's progressive.
Mrs. Berg, do you have any comments? You haven't really addressed your thoughts on this issue.
Well, I'm concerned. The College of William and Mary textbook, will that book be going home with the students? I mean, I have a couple of gifted kids, and I know that even though something may not be assigned to them, gifted kids have a tendency to something it piques their interest. They go beyond what's just assigned or in the curriculum. If some of that child pornography or some of those other issues that are concerning, would they have access to those at home? I mean, will that book, is that a carry home book, I guess?
It probably could be. I don't know that it will be. And again, I think, if that's an essay that we think may not be appropriate, we certainly don't have to use it. But again, it's a definition of the word pornography. And so I think we have to be cognizant of the fact that I think our kids have heard that word before. and probably heard a whole lot more. I would highly recommend that if the board moved to voting and approved the curriculum, that at parent night, we have a very candid conversation about the essay pieces and the novels that would be used in the program, and then if parents were not happy with the selections, they certainly could choose supplemental material and an alternative assignment.
That's an option. I have a chance to look at the books tomorrow and or Thursday in a little more detail if we want to delay it. Otherwise, I'm leaning more towards maybe abstaining since I haven't had a chance to look at it. I don't want to take up too much more time. And so unless we'd like to table it and give me a chance to come in and kind of read some of those concerning things before I vote. I know that's a possibility. Otherwise, I think I would abstain and leave it to leave the vote to those that have had a chance to look at it more carefully. And again, I apologize. I've had quite a bit on my plate.
I move to table it then. I would rather table it and allow you the opportunity to look through the materials, make your own assessment. I think for the most part, it's a wonderful curriculum, and if there are a couple things there that I think our teachers care about our kids. My kids' teacher spent more time with my child than I did because they had him at school all day. So I think that teachers can do a good job of protecting and using materials carefully to educate our children and help them to grow and learn about things, but not in a way that is not appropriate for them.
So, Mrs. Burke, did you motion to table?
No, I motion to table.
Okay, I need a second then before, we should always second before we discuss. Is there a second to table the William and Mary?
I'll second that.
You need a verbal vote, Mrs. Sokolsky? No, she'll be able to do electronically.
Mrs. Bernard, if it gets tabled, how much time do you have to get this approved in order to have this ready for the fall? And if it doesn't pass, do you have enough time to get another curriculum in place for the fall? Or it
No,
won't
we
open
don't,
this
we
fall?
don't have enough time, but I mean, we certainly understand if it's the board's decision not to approve the curriculum, we won't have a curriculum for the self-contained classroom at the level of appropriateness that they need. Certainly if we table it, it'll just be a delay instead of not having it if it is approved. Typically, we order our materials and start our purchase orders, entering those around July 1 when the new budget is here. And so if this is approved at a later time, it would be delayed, and that is certainly something that we can work with. If it's not approved, I would certainly need to sit and visit with the committee in terms of getting some ideas from them in terms of what they would like to use for curriculum. Again, one thing that we need to make sure that we're delivering on our promise to our gifted parents, that we will have a specialized curriculum that is appropriate to meet the needs of the students. And again, I think we need to be cognizant of the vision that came out of the gifted committee, where we talked about meeting those emotional needs of the gifted student and the academic needs and recognizing their potential. It's very difficult sometimes to find the material for them at their level, from a text perspective, and find things that, are at the right level of maturity. So I can appreciate some of those comments. It is a balancing act when you're trying to meet their needs and yet not get above their social emotional level, so to speak. So it is a balancing act, but I do want to make sure that we, get back to what we promised our parents and that we find materials out there. If the board would like, we can get probably some written feedback as well from Paradise Valley and Deer Valley, because again, they've assured us that they have used these materials and they've not had any issues, and they've found them to be quite appropriate in their self-contained program. So I just want to offer that as, some additional thought as well.
Well, and what would, okay, so this would be the text for the classroom, for these two classes. If for some reason there was an issue, like let's say all of us didn't agree that a couple of, let's say all of us, the entire board said we're not comfortable with it after reviewing, we have that 60-day textbook review process. So we're kind of at a, it just occurred to me, we're kind of at a last minute
That's right, Ms. Burke, we did have 60 days to go review those books.
well, that's what I'm saying. So let's say that we all didn't like it. I mean, let's just say it really, I mean, this is the purpose. The community has a chance to look at it. And let's say it was, I'd like for us to, and I get that this particular program we kind of approved late, but in the future, I'd like to ask that we leave plenty of time just in case there is an issue that comes up with curriculum or the community feedback came back. I mean, we're also putting it that if the community had come back and said, we're not happy with these books, that we would be up against that time frame. So,
Absolutely, Mrs. Burke, and I would recommend that when we do the work study early in the fall and look at the textbook and supplemental materials, that perhaps we also make some adjustments about timeline. And I'm really glad that you recognize we didn't have a choice tonight, because the self-contained program, although we've discussed that many times over the last 2 years, did not get approved until last March. And so the committee's been working really hard and spent a lot of time reviewing materials and programs out there and getting this here. And of course, any elementary curriculum we look at, or actually K-8, requires a 60-day review instead of a 30-day review. So it is timely. I agree, and we can add that in there when we look at that policy in the fall.
Right. Ms. Burke, since you're not comfortable with making a decision now, and you're saying you're able to review it tomorrow, are we
Yes.
able to put this back on a special meeting this week when we interview, so we can get this completed in a timely manner so that we can get the curriculum ordered for them?
yeah, that would be fine. So Thursday night, we'll address the executive session and this issue.
So does that mean we're ready to vote on tabling?
I guess we're ready to vote on table.
Okay. Is that okay if we vote now, Mrs. Burke? You okay with that?
Yes.
Okay. So board members, please vote. Do we need to do a verbal, Mrs. Sokolsky? Correct. This is just on tabling the William and Mary portion. Mrs. Burke, would you give us a verbal vote, please?
Aye.
Motion carries 4-1. Okay, now I would like to go ahead and discuss the Michael Clay Thompson. If the rest of the board members would, because that was the second portion that we had broken it into. Mr. Colvin, would you like to start? Skip. Mrs. Tran?
It'll be the same as what I've said earlier with William and Mary, so
Okay.
supportive of it. And we should be tabling this item too.
Mrs. Humphries?
Just when I reviewed the Michael Clay Thompson Language Arts, I was very excited the way that they used architecture to explain grammar. I felt like it was very informative and very inviting to the students. I love the uncluttered look of the pages. I know someone mentioned that they felt like that was a waste of paper, but I felt it helped the students to focus on what was there. And if you have a gifted child who has ADD, that's an actual benefit for them to not have as much on a page, and it is less overwhelming. I like the way it used Latin roots, prefixes, and suffixes, and had creative extensions. And I just overall felt it was a very quality curriculum and would recommend its adoption.
I loved these materials. I was actually familiar with this author a few years ago when I was researching homeschooling materials, and I know that he does a lot of homeschooling. I thought that they were all very well written, very appropriate for the students. The illustrations, I liked the theme that was throughout the same book, whether it was a duck or a boat or Rome. And I just thought that they were very well written. I was learning stuff going through reading it. I found it very interesting. I thought that the illustrations really drew the student in to want to really look at the material. So I really did enjoy his materials, and I actually asked Darcy to look up to see if he has a language arts textbook that maybe we could use instead, and she looked it up, and unfortunately he does not. He only has the supplemental materials. Mrs. Burke, did you have any comments or about Michael Clay Thompson, the supplementals?
No.
Okay. Is there any other comment before we vote on this? Or do we wish to table it? I would prefer to go ahead and vote.
I prefer to table because this will impact if we don't approve the other one.
Do we have any other comment on it? Do you wish to vote or table? Mr. Colvin?
Go ahead and carry it forward to a vote.
Mrs. Humphries?
I'm torn. I don't really want to table it because I think it is good. But again, if one piece doesn't go, it's really not helpful to just have a few supplementals. I suppose I'm ready to vote, I guess.
Mrs. Burke?
I'd say if everyone's comfortable with this and we're ready to vote, the only thing that voting helps is that Mrs. Bernard can begin to prepare the paperwork to go forward if the other passes or either way. I don't think she's going to run out and order them in the next 2 days.
Ms. Bernard, if the other one, the William and Mary, doesn't pass, will these books fit into any other curriculum that you're going to choose? Because I don't want to make this approval and spend the funds on this if it's not going to work with the other curriculum.
You know, we recommended it as a package. And so if the other curriculum does not pass, I would say we'd go back to the drawing board and see what we need to bring forward. We wouldn't necessarily be bringing forward a grammar and vocabulary supplement because we might find another program that might not need a supplement if one
Right. Then we're going to waste the
exists
funds
out
on
there.
this. I would think we should table this item until.
Did I agree with Mrs. Tran that if one is going to be tabled, that we should table this one as well?
Mrs. Bernard, if we were to pass this, does that mean that you must purchase it? Or if the other item does not go through, it's your decision to not use
You
it?
passed it, you would be adopting this as curriculum for the elementary language arts gifted program.
Okay,
And so we might want to consider that.
okay.
I move to table the Michael Clay Thompson Language Arts supplemental materials.
Thank you, Mrs. Humphries. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Tran. Any further discussion before we vote? Hearing none. Mrs. Burke, what's your vote on tabling the Michael Clay Thompson materials?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
I would like to clarify my vote. I think it's very important that when we consider curriculum materials, that we consider the input that we have received, mostly positive input from people who bothered to take the time to come in, people who came here to speak, and the community. And I think we need to have a broad range of materials that address the academic, social needs of the child, that is acceptable to most of the community, and trust that our teachers will take care of any items that may not be as appropriate as we would wish.
Okay, next agenda item 8.03, approve. Yes, Mrs. Burke.
Can I add
Yes.
something on that?
Yes.
I agree, and I appreciate all of the feedback and people that have came in and commented. Again, I can't see the details of that feedback, so that's something that I'll also look at when I come in. And again, I apologize. And I just want to say that this program is something that I've pushed for even before I got on the board. I'm very happy for this self-contained program. It's been a long time coming, and gifted education is a passion of mine, and so having gifted kids, I take this to heart, and I do want to see this program move forward and be successful. So I look forward to looking at that, and I apologize for the extra couple day delay in the vote on that. So, okay, go ahead.
Thank you.